Any updates for this summer programs? Post-COVID, or COVID, I should say. So far, we've been students some of the efficiencies that we did last year. Obviously, we will be in person, hybrid, and construction. We did very well in terms of the overall confidence and distribution of the process. We obviously person in our world, yes, and looking very hard as a school year. Leverage as much resources as students are during the recess. It's a great time to give students basic skills from reading and writing. It's also having an opportunity for secondary students to make and maybe second round instruction based on experiences across the year to make sure they understand the curriculum and all that kind of stuff. It's very important that students go through certain seasons of the program and well-rounded and skills as they come up, and especially as they're being able to translate that in classes in high school and make sure that they're prepared and want to themselves as they go to college, workforce, trade school, and if we go into this fall, I'm very happy to make sure that our thinking work, our Carson schools is 100% prepared to receive all students, no matter where they may be this past year, and being able to help them forward. Previous school years, Carson schools started with our elementary program. Our main supports around goodwill and expertise of our teachers having to really try to think about students that have gaps in the classrooms. We have a lot of teaching skills, especially math and literacy, to be able to help us get them across the year. And we're really very excited and emotional making sure that number of students that we grow in the schools will be driving for the students that are top and bottom and be able to catch up and push forward. And to do that, each year Carson schools to support our teachers and a literacy coach at every single elementary building, which was a very hard thing for basic goals and additional elements to be managed in that program, which is absolutely right for the schools to feed and curriculum and direction and keeping them to learn as elementary school. I'm very happy to report that this upcoming that all 7 of our elementary programs, in addition to the literacy coach, will also have a math coach and a support individuals
for students at all ends of the spectrum, to support teachers in classrooms, for students to be able to grow or catch up depending on wherever they are on the spectrum and push forward. In the past, we've had supports that were leveraged by building aides or parapros. In this case, our intervention specialists are all highly trained teachers that will be not only working with classroom teachers to help identify all the different ways that we collect data on students in terms of the progress in math and literacy, but help teachers not only identify areas where they can improve their instruction universally, but also provide specific interventions in the toolbox to be able to support students. Previously, most years, we were very, I'd say, generic and really trying to build students' capacity to do math. Now with the diagnostics, we'll be able to apply specific intervention packages that we'll be able to bring to bear this fall. I have really high expectations to see the amount of growth that our students have potential for. This is at every single one of our elementaries, so I'm incredibly proud to see the potential that we're going to see. Additionally, we know that students are going to be coming forth not only in the elementary, but presenting in secondary schools as well as needing supports and additional attention by their teachers. To that end, both in elementary and in secondary, I'm very excited to report that we're going to have some of the lowest class sizes, K through 12, that have ever been recorded in Carson schools. We need that this upcoming year. We need an opportunity for our teachers to work with students in smaller groups, be able not only help them hone and grow their basic skills, both in the elementary in terms of math and reading and literacy, but also looking at, as they go up to the secondary, having more individual time with their math teacher, more individual time with their LA or social studies teacher, to be able to read concepts they might have struggled at, or in previous years might have been more linear in terms of the overall class presentation. We're expecting a great deal more divergence based on the students' experience and how they tolerated over the last year. To have smaller class sizes also will enhance our ability to identify students who need supports along the social emotional side. We know that many of our students, either from isolation, fear, or whatever struggles they might have encountered over the past year, need that additional supportive relationships with their teachers to help them get to the next level. Additionally, our teachers in this capacity will be able to serve as a first round to help identify students that might be struggling more socially emotional than other years. And we feel like we need to have our eyes and ears in cooperation with families to identify students that might have longer-term repercussions of COVID, both on their mental health and their physical health as we push in this year. To that end, as we identify students and we look at our ability to support both in terms of social work and counseling, where we need extra gaps filled in if there's more students than we can service on the immediate, our buildings are working on secondary plans to make sure that we can enhance our capacities in the mental health and support areas to make sure that our students' needs are met in that realm too. On the whole, Clarkston will not only have low class sizes and new programs in terms of being able to support our students to grow forward into next year. I'm excited to see that the potential moving forward over the next several years is almost limitless in my mind. Our students are going to leave Clarkston schools better prepared, not only in their basic reading, math, thinking skills, but really be able to excel and pursue whatever they decide to go past Clarkston. And with the thought of the filling of these positions and being able to prepare to the start of the school year, we were very fortunate to really draw in a significant number of very highly qualified teachers from not only coming out of colleges, which has become less and less and less each year, but also teachers from other districts that are looking to come to a more upwardly mobile community, possibly in terms of everything that Clarkston has to offer of attracting people to come and live and be citizens here as well. So I'm really excited to see how this year is going to unfold. I really have high hopes that we need to take a strong stance on making sure that our students have a good, not only support network, but that we as a school district be able to identify where they are in point in time. It's not about judging students of being behind or not getting it or being in a spot where they somehow failed. Quite the contrary, I think we plan to meet each and every student wherever they are and to be able to push them forward across the next school year. And again, I'm very excited to see how this is going to start to manifest and be able to really kind of push the overall caliber of all of our students and our programs forward over the next several years. So that's in kind of a encapsulated nutshell. Obviously, I feel like I could go on for hours talking about some of the micro details that relates to this, but I think that's a good survey for at least our Board of Education this evening and for our community to hear as we get ready to start the upcoming school year. So thank you, President Horst.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Any questions or comments for Dr. Ryan from the board?
I just wanted to say my middle schooler, who also struggled really hard this year, was something you had spoken about earlier, the summer programming that we put in place. He was able to take advantage of that, and I just want to publicly acknowledge the amazing job the teachers who were part of that program did. In a 3-week small chunk, he made leaps and bounds. He did very well, so it was just something I really wanted to thank the teachers for and the district.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Item 5 is presentation items. We have none tonight. Item 6 is action items. 6.1 is approval of personnel changes. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the personnel changes as listed on the attached sheets.
Support.
Any questions or comments from the board? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.2 is approval of contract agreements for assistant superintendents. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the contracts for the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services and the Assistant Superintendent of Administrative Services as presented.
Support.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. I'll sit back. Item 6.3 is approval of district-wide radio purchase. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education authorize the administration to execute a contract for renovations to our district-wide radio systems, a base bid of $291,295.66, and a contingency of $14,564.78 for a total bid award of $305,860.44 to ComSource, Inc. as presented.
Support. Are there any questions or comments from the board? I see Ms. Harrison is here in the audience tonight in case there are. All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.4 is approval of various device purchases. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the device purchases as presented from CDWG for a total of $81,999.70 as presented.
Support.
Any questions or comments from the board? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.5 is approval for board member attendance at conferences or workshops related to their responsibilities as Board of Education members for the 21-22 school year. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves board member attendance at any of the attached conferences as in compliance with Board Bylaw 0175.1.
Support.
Any questions or comments from the board? And again, these are just potential attendance, right? We approve this a year ahead of time and knowing that our schedules may change, our interests may change, but these are the things that we may attend. We just approve it in one fell swoop ahead of time. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 7 is report items. We do have one report tonight, 7.1 for our board, from our Board Operating Procedures Committee, which was created 2 academic years ago, right? Pre-COVID.
It's impossible to believe that, but yes, it was.
Pre-COVID, and then really kind of put on hold, obviously, when our attention was, elsewhere last year. But I know Ms. Crane and Ms. Catalina spent some time working on this over the year, and we started talking about it again over the winter. And I asked them to just sort of come and give us kind of a report, because rather than just sort of redo the draft and present it to everybody, I think there were sort of some sort of structural and operational kinds of issues that they just asked for some feedback and some discussion from the rest of the board. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Crane to kind of lead us through that discussion here.
So I know this says it's a report. I'd like it to be kind of a cohesive discussion instead. I'd like to just talk about it really quickly. When we first did it two school years ago, I was the newest member on the board. So President Horst asked me to take this committee and just to be able to look at it with fresh eyes. And I wanted to do that without having a discussion first, which I actually now think may have been a slight mistake and an overreach, but I think it'll go well in this next year. So when I read it with fresh eyes, one of the things I'd like to talk about, especially Mr. Heyer, with your institutional knowledge, I'd like to kind of have an understanding
It's been a
of
long time.
what?
Been a long time.
Long time. What the original purpose of it was, because it was really hard for me to ascertain when I read through the original document. It read in a very slightly disorganized manner. It read as something. So I was looking at it from 2 ways, kind of trying to figure out what in it I wanted to keep and what was needed and what I wanted it to be moving forward. So I guess to do that, I need to understand why it was created. But what I would like to kind of get your opinion on as well is what I want it to be going forward, because there was a lot of redundancy in it. There's a lot of pieces of it that are already covered in our policy, that are already covered in our bylaws. I don't think that needs to be in there. So what I think it should be, and what I'd like to see moving forward, is that it's kind of an agreement amongst the board on how we treat each other, even in times of disagreement, in times of contention, in times of agreement, and maybe that we affirm it every year at our retreat is kind of what I would like to see. That was what I was thinking. So with that, I'd like to clean up the redundancy. I'd like to clean up the organizational part of it, outdated content, relevancy, So that's kind of what I was thinking, but I would like to open a discussion and see maybe kind of where it came from and what you guys would like to see out of it, so that maybe in the next 6 months I can have a final draft and then we can affirm it yearly going forward.
You know what I noticed just now, that this end of the table, like all of our eyes just sort of went like this, because this is the more experienced.
I know. Well,
I
mine
don't
have to
think we
go
did this
that
on
way.
purpose,
That's not
Mrs.
fair.
McLean, but like, this is the wisdom. We'll just call it the
I
wisdom end of
can't
the
look
table.
left. I can only look right.
So maybe we'll let you guys chime
Well,
in here.
certainly,
I see
I
that.
think
I
we
didn't
could
just
just,
look
yeah.
at it until I agree with
The
you.
more
Yeah.
experienced trustees are kind of on this end of the table. How do we say that?
Well, we were on the board at the time when we really felt we had to develop them. So, I don't know, Mrs. McGinnis
And
could
we
start.
chuckled not because it was silly.
No,
and
no.
Not a useful
It didn't read
document,
as silly.
But we chuckled because we went through some tumultuous times.
Mhm.
And as a board of education, we operate as a board. Yes, we're 7 individuals, but we operate as a board. We're not congressmen or women. We don't get to just go out in the community and say what we feel and not worry about the impact of it on the Board of Education for this district. And at the time that the document was created, we had multiple voices of the board in the community that were doing a disservice to the Board of Education. And the document in its original form was not created here in Clarkson. It was created in another Oakland County community. I don't honestly know their reasoning why, but we took their base document and added and or deleted from it as we felt necessary. I think one of the good tools of the document is it's a little bit of a cheat sheet of the policies. The policies can be very dry and redundant themselves. So for a new board member to come in and try to inundate themselves with to read through all the policies and to grasp all that information in a short period of time. I mean, we all joke about the number one thing we suggest to all new board members is to sit quiet for a year, because there's so much to learn. It's great to have an opinion,
It's
but it's better
overwhelming.
to have an opinion based on the policies and procedures of the community. So it's a great tool for a cheat sheet, but it was also a tool, as you said, to use as an affirmation of how we wanted, what kind of board norms we wanted to establish in how we professionally spoke to one another and how we as a board of education presented ourselves and the work that we do on behalf of the community to the community.
Mhm.
So it established some very basic isms to behave in a way that is conducive of an elected official.
Mhm.
We're entrusted by the people of our community to do a job on behalf of our community, and we should behave accordingly, professionally. And so, not to say that there isn't some parts of it that can be eliminated, because you say it is redundant. The problem just becomes that when a new board member comes on and we remove that redundancy, we remove that safety net for a new person who has yet to grasp all the policies, where the board operating procedures may provide them an initial step into what it's like to be a board member.
Okay.
I guess that would be my
hadn't looked
first-
at it from that. I mean, I like that idea, and I think there's a deeper discussion on how much of that we want to keep in there. Because I would have probably said, let's remove all of that, but I think that is a really,
And I do think, depending on the makeup of the board, you can use less of it and or more of it.
Well,
So,
there are
but the problem
definitely
becomes when
things-
you need more of it and it's not there, then the need to have a majority vote, we always know that we need 4 votes, right, to pass something. The need to have 4 votes to put something back in that you might have taken out, that keeps decorum in the boardroom, I was gonna say classroom, in the boardroom. Now you have a pickle you're in, that you're
Yeah.
not maintaining decorum or professionalism in the boardroom, and you have a board that is not in agreement of what that professionalism looks like.
Yep.
So to take out some of the professionalism redundancy, may be a disservice in the future.
right. No, that's the part I really want to keep in. I really want it to be an affirmation of how we treat each other, how we present to the greater community, and that was my thoughts and what I really want it to be. So, Mrs. Egan?
So just a couple quick comments. I won't reiterate what Mrs. McGinnis has already said, but you know, every time one person leaves the board and a new person comes on, it can change the dynamic of the board. So when we bring a new board member on, we go through what's called a new board member orientation so that they understand what, you know, how to access the policies, how to read the policies, get them oriented in terms of what committee memberships they probably want to jump in on to make them more effective sooner. Things like MASB training and professional development. We all want our board to be professionally trained and educated, so we participate in those leadership conferences. So my opinion is this is certainly still needed. It will always be needed. It should be part of maybe the cliff notes, if you will, of good boardsmanship. We want to perhaps make this a part of our new board member orientation packet. It should be streamlined so that it's easy to read. I think referencing the policies that maybe are the best priorities in terms of read these first, get to know what it is that you're supposed to be doing at the board table, how to behave. Things like caucusing. We are not allowed to caucus, meaning the only time we can have a discussion as a board is right here at the table when we are in a meeting. We don't walk out of here and then go have a private meeting. We are not legislators. So we do not have that right. We do not have that power. Our powers are established by the state of Michigan. So those are very important. In fact, I think it's what, Michigan Statute 380 point, I don't know what number, but that might be part of the reference in terms of policies. So I think new board orientation, this is where it really belongs.
Yeah, I think that's good. And as the newest member, the orientation was a whirlwind. It's a lot of information at once.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
I think there's a lot that could be eliminated, but just because it's contained somewhere else, I don't think immediately warrants it to be eliminated. Ideally, this is a document that really contains the unwritten rules, and so when I got on the board, there was a lot of experience on the board, and all the rules were unwritten. And I tripped on a couple of them inadvertently, and I was, spoken to, and then I knew the rules. And, we went through a period where we had several different board members that had different ideas of what the rules are, and we're all equally elected. So the only way to establish rules is for us to come together and vote and say, these are the rules that we're going to abide by. And generally, those are more detailed than what's contained in the bylaws. Like, the bylaws are how we operate.
Right.
We can change the bylaws if we want with a super majority vote, but it's not something you just like, I don't think we're going to do that today. The bylaws are the foundation of how we operate. And so this was to go to that next level. How do we address each other at the board table? Who speaks for the board? How do we handle email inquiries? Like, there's a lot of logistical kinds of things that are in here. A little bit more detail in terms of officers and how some of that works. But by and large, it's writing down the unwritten rules.
I
And
like
so
that way
if
to say it.
if there are things in here that, like, they're just so obvious and they're contained elsewhere, we don't need to say them, great. If there are things in here that are contained elsewhere and it's still a really good idea to reiterate them, like, it definitely makes sense. No individual can take any action outside of the board, right? That is in every document, policy, bylaw, Open Meetings Act, right? It's probably worth repeating in here as well. Where, maybe how to turn in an expense report or something might be a little more detailed in here than it would be in a bylaw, for example. But I think and how public comment works is very well laid out in the bylaws. I don't know that we need to reiterate that. Why repeat the exact same thing again? And so I think we could definitely shorten this. I think we can clean up formatting. I think we can, definitely improve the document and make it more relevant to our operations. The only thing I would add to what has been said already beyond that is that there's a piece in here for sort of our interaction with the superintendent as well. Because I think at the very beginning of the document, it talks about the board superintendent team.
does.
right? And so, you know, there's some information in here about, all right, something happens, how do we expect the administration to communicate out with us? You know, what's an email? When we did this, I mean, text messages are, we had paper packets when I started on the board. That's how old I am. You know, we didn't have a lot of electronic communication at that point. So, you know, what's a phone call? What's a text message? What's an email? You know, I mean, just kind of spelling that out, because, you know, if I was a superintendent, I would definitely want to know, how does the board want to receive information? You know, is it, if it's normal, regular, run-of-the-mill information, there's a process for that. If something happens, you know, how are we notified? And I think we have no issues there. We've done an excellent job of keeping the board informed. I mean, there's very few times that I get hit with something that I've never heard of, and then if I ask, it's usually the superintendent hadn't heard about it either, which is why we didn't find out. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot construct. I think the process that you suggested is a good one. You know, if there's maybe you know, going through and maybe figuring out what you want to eliminate and giving us a red line
That's what I
version,
was
and just,
thinking.
you know, we could just maybe give you a thumbs up along the way.
Or tell me why you don't think it should be
Yeah.
eliminated, right? Okay, what I'd like to do is have that probably, you know, within the next 4 to 5 months, so that we can really dig into it in the few months after that. So by this time next year, it's a actual thing that we can affirm.
Yeah.
That's what I'd really like to do.
Yeah, and I don't know that, like, there's probably a little bit of cleanup of what we decide to keep. It's probably pretty good, is my guess of what's there. You know, I think there's, like I said, the communication methods and some of those things, but like the how we address each other and how we respond to things, I think that's all probably pretty accurate and stands on its own.
Yeah, there's some organizational, it was very interesting. There was a couple of things where, you know, we make a joke at work when there's a rule, it's because somebody did something wrong at some point, and there's some of those things that think, oh, what did somebody do that made somebody put that in there? So there's some very specific kind of things, but
And I would say when I looked at it after, you know, you
Mhm.
shared it with me,
Mm-hmm.
that was my reaction was, well, a lot of this stuff we don't do anymore. You know, I
Right.
mean, just as things have evolved. And so those were the things going through, certainly having gone through now agenda planning for the last couple of years. I think just, and as laws have changed, as evaluations have changed and become so prescriptive through the law, there were a lot of things in here about goals and timelines that just aren't even relevant anymore. I mean, they just don't matter. I mean, those things are prescribed to us. And so I wouldn't want to see those in a document anymore and give the impression that something is or isn't happening because it's being dictated to us now in a different format. So I thought there were some things like that we could definitely get cleaned up.
Yeah, I think along those lines, the dip and sip,
Sure.
That's a big change.
which
Right,
brings
that's all
back
being
some
changed.
memories.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that that's especially important, but like for instance, like how we do an annual retreat and set goals is not particularly described elsewhere.
No.
And the fact that those are board goals, you know, I mean, that would be something that I think needs to be in this
I
document.
agree.
And it really, as you go through it, you know, if like how we do the agenda right now is pretty straightforward and clear, right? If we have something we want on the agenda, we contact our board leadership, they meet, they create the agenda. And I can't remember, like, probably in the last, you know, I don't know, 3-4 years of, you know, any issues where somebody said, hey, I wanted this on the agenda and I didn't get it. And that's just a realm of where we are. But I mean, we could be in a place where, you know, Mrs. Crane, you want to talk about, you know, directional boring under Sashabaw Middle School, and the rest of us are going, that isn't particularly relevant. Like, why would we talk about that? No, thank you. Like, we need a way to work that out.
Yeah.
Right? That, you know, we're, you know, going through that. And that's, you know, that's what this really spells out is, you know, what is the expectation of the officers? Because just because Mrs. Horst is having a bad day doesn't mean nobody gets anything on the agenda. Right? I mean, we've got to cover those possibilities.
Maybe.
I think the thing to remember is this is how we choose as a board to self-regulate ourselves.
Yeah. I like the idea of it being the place to write down the unwritten rules, because we've all blundered over those, I mean, at some point. So
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Mr. Need?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that the experienced end of the board is
You'll
brought up tonight.
Experienced end of the board.
And I thank Mrs. Crane and Ms. Catalina. It's a lot of work, I know, having been on the policy
It didn't look
committee
like it was
before.
gonna be a lot of work.
Well, I didn't tell you that when you took a team on, The only caution that I have with regard to redundancy is that you can get into a situation where you're not redundant, but you have two things covering the same topic that are a little different, where you change one and you forget to change the other. So I'm
I was
great with
worried about that as
cross-references
well.
or emphasizing the bylaws that are important, but we ought to try to clean that part up.
Yeah, I agree. I was worried about that, and I thought part of making it an annual affirmation is making sure that whatever board procedures committee has to make sure that it still matches whatever part is, policy or bylaw.
I like the annual affirmation, like at our organizational meeting. I think it's a great thing to do. And if there are things we want to talk about, we could certainly punt it to our retreat to get more in. That happens to be the same tonight.
idea.
But
I think
typically,
it's a little bit of a, I promise to treat you with respect this year for 1 year, and then we'll see if I want to affirm it again. But,
it is a good thing to just see like what has changed, because things do change, and typically not in the span of a year. But I don't remember when we last adopted this. It's probably been 6 years or something like that.
That was another question I had.
Since I think we reaffirmed a couple times when we were using it, and it served us well. There were points of disagreement, but in terms of being a high functioning board, this is what it is, and it's just how we operate, because we can't be communicating with all different voices. We need to. The basics of what this outlines, right, is that we come to the table, we all have our individual opinions, we share individual opinions, we discuss, and we have different plans and different versions, we get input and recommendations, and ultimately we vote, and then we're all supporting what we voted on.
Yeah.
Right, and communicating with that, and that's how we operate as a board, and how we could be successful. And to avoid, obviously our focus, as Dr. Ryan very eloquently laid out in his report, our focus is on students showing growth every year, right? And if our focus is on other nonsense, it's not on that. And that's why this helps us get rid of all that,
All
kind
the
of
noise.
distraction to focus on kids, which I think is why we're on the board.
I believe it is. All right, thank you. If there's anything else, please let me know. I've taken some really good notes and have a really, I think, clear idea on how to move forward. So
All right.
I appreciate it very much.
Good. And I know it was in our consent agenda, so I don't know that everyone had a chance to, see everyone's assignment, but Ms. Catalina and Ms. Crane agreed to continue their assignment on this ad hoc committee, which I believe is in existence until I say it's not. So thank you
Well,
very
now
much
it's
for
every year.
continuing the work on,
I think we've now just said it has to be here every year.
yeah, thank you. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll check in on that again, then maybe in 4 or 5 months, and see what else you may need from the board at
For
that
sure.
time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 8, discussion items, which is our 21-22 board priorities. And trustees, last week I asked each of you to send me, say, 3 to 5 items that were kind of on your radar in terms of what you wanted to kind of track or learn more about over the course of the year. And in the past years, we've done this discussion differently, where we've gotten around the table and maybe whittled this down to, say our top 3 sort of goals, if you will, for the year, sort of big picture items that we really wanted to dive into. And just being that last year we were kind of so singularly focused, I felt like there was a lot more that I think we were going to be interested in following or tracking this year. And so I wanted just kind of input from everybody, and just see where everyone's heads were and where your areas of interest were. Also knowing that we were going to go to monthly meetings for this coming year, and really have, kind of weightier meetings, and be able to, play with the format a little bit differently, and not maybe just have workshops, but try to build in content in some different ways. I really wanted to, just see where we were thinking and where we had some kind of common ideas. And so having kind of condensed all of our ideas really down into 4 categories. So we had some ideas under academic performance and measurement. There were several ideas under district finances, several ideas under programming kind of broadly. Some of that was, I would say, more classroom kind of programming, some more under the support programming category or co-curricular programming, and then more of the operations and management side. And that includes both our sort of management piece as well as, the district management piece. And so you may not see your own language here specifically, but I kind of categorize them, if you will, put them under bullets, and then I just wanted to have some discussion here, maybe just kind of category by category, and see if we wanted to whittle them down more, fine-tune them more. And then this really will be the charge that the agenda planning team takes with it into the room really for the year. So I don't know that you'll see this kind of once a month necessarily, but some of this will be things that we track over the year and bring back to the boardroom. I think you'll see this in a lot of different ways. Some of this may be workshops that we do where we do more of a deep dive, say with the special education director, and look at new trends, new thinking, what's she bringing, you know, to the district once she's had a chance to kind of settle in. Some of this where we say we want to follow the data and we want to follow XYZ program, maybe that's something we do a little more over the long haul. So that's kind of why I was thinking, you know, how I got to sort of this format and this structure this year. Just wanting to do it a little differently, knowing that we would have, I think, a lot more interest and a lot more kind of content on our plate, that we were able to, you know, have a lot more activity this year than being so singularly minded as we were last year. So with that, we'll just start at the top, looking at the kind of three big areas that rose to the top under the category of academic performance and measurement. And so you may recognize, and if you don't, I have kind of the master list here with people's initials by it, if you don't recognize your own thing there. But I'll just let you all sort of talk. This first one, I think, were from Mrs. Egan and Mr. Heyer. So I'm just going to let you kind of talk a little bit about the bullets, and we can sort of see if we want to keep them on the list, fine tune them a little more.
Well, so the Michigan Department of Education, their Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement process actually, I think, is a good priority to adopt, because I think it's going to impact some of these other bullet points that we actually have on this. So for instance,
conversation, you know, over the last year, but like we have so many enrollment pieces now that like just coming up with a, you know, a blended count is more challenging than it's been in the past. So I think probably in the January timeframe, because we don't have a lot going on in January, is when it makes sense to really dive in, you know, not necessarily in context of budget creation, but we're going to have some parameters and we're going to need to project out, you know, what does this look like? If we roll the money forward as far as we can roll it forward, and, you know, what do we have on there, and what do we want to add, and morph and change and tweak, and, you know, what are those strategic priorities, you know, certainly including, you know, our staff.
Students in Clarkston, and I think keeping that stability over years. I mean, we haven't had a year, we haven't had 10% growth in our shared service partnerships or anything on top of what we've already been able to produce, which is great, but it also, you know, looking long term, you know, laws change, you know, patterns of student enrollment in private schools that are our partners change. All those things can kind of be up over time, and I think that it's really important that we stay really tight on the wheel to make sure we can guide those policies, also reflective of fund equity, because that's the other message, and I don't think that's changing from the board, is that we operate in Clarkston within our means, period. We maintain good facilities, period. You know, these kind of things are not only, I think, directions from the board, but I think they're very strong kind of reflections and projections from our community and their expectations of Clarkston schools. Thank you.
Dr. I heard you say we're top 10, and my translation of that is we have room to grow when it comes to innovative programming. And I say that in jest, but in seriousness, like, we have the staff to be able to go after our innovative programming. And I think as a board, you know, whether that's a budget parameter or something cultural, like we have a cultural, while it's a budget parameter, it's cultural that we underspend our budget every year, right? I mean, that's just the way it is here. It took a while to get there, but I mean, we're not one of those districts where it's like, hey, we better spend it or we're gonna lose it, right? That is not how we operate. And so the same way, I think we wanna keep our foot on the gas when it comes to innovative programming. And that may be taking some calculated risks. I mean, we're very conservative financially, but we could certainly invest in a program. We've invested in having staff to manage the innovative programming. It's paid off, you know, and that's not typical in education, right? That's not something you do in a school district, to say, hey, let's hire these people to manage and grow this program. And we've done that, and it has paid dividends, and it allowed us to do some great things. And even a lot of the supports that we have in place were well underway before we get any federal money, well before there were any pandemic. I mean, we were preparing for this for years now. And so I think that's a really important piece, that however we work that in, whether, like I said, I don't know if it's a budget parameter, if it's just something we hammer, continuously. Like, we want to continue to innovate. We bring us some crazy ideas. Some of them may go somewhere, some of them may not. And I know we're always, looking for those things and trying to uncover them. And even, does it make sense to hire somebody else in another district that has some experience with something that we want to do here? We've worked that way, which again is not the way education typically works, but we've had such success with that. I want to keep that going.
And the city that success, it comes from not having. We've been a base-funded district since 1994. And if people in the audience don't know what that means that Oakland County is spanned between what Carson gets, and I'm speaking generally, compared to the top 4 or 5 districts, is $5,000 a student. That's a lot of money. You multiply that by students, by years from today, from 1994, it's a lot of money those other districts have had to educate their students that we haven't had. And you go into the halls of other districts, or you have other districts come to our halls and they are like, you're a base-funded district, how did you do this? Or they hear you, oh, you're from Clarkston? Oh, I know Clarkston, and I'm way up here in the UP, and I don't even know where Flint is, for example, but I know where Clarkston is. So we've gotten this from the tenacity that we have to have better programs for our students, to give money for educating our students above what the state gives us. What I would really like to see on this, under the budget planning area, because I'm always been a little bit of a pessimist regarding the state when it comes to what they're going to give us, is our current per pupil allowance, which I think went up 144 this year, which would probably put us in 2250 or 8,250, something like that. I don't know the exact number. I don't know that that's going to be our number next year. We're not assured of that. And I want to be very, very cautious of how we layer out the monies of especially the federal money that we've gotten in the buckets of when they can be spent and when's the last deadline of when it has to be spent, how it's supposed to be spent, because we know with every dollar we get, there's 100 strings as to how it can be spent. But I'd really like to see a timeline, the graph of what bucket of money goes from here to here and what bucket goes from here to here and so on and so forth, so that we can back into those buckets in that planning to decide how we're going to use, when we make a jump to another program or when we look at making fundamental changes in how we teach any of our students. And I think that we have to do it with a lot of planning. It's not just quickly spend the money, even though there's so much of it there to be spent. I just think we need to be extremely cautious on how we spend it, and I think having a good timeline of what we want to do is going to be crucial to making sure we don't miss any points of where we ramp on and ramp off.
Okay, thank you.
It almost sounds like what we're talking about is committed versus discretionary funds, kind of like how we have the buckets in our fund equity.
Yeah.
Our operating dollars maybe the board just doesn't, because the administration works with it all the time. Maybe we just don't really understand it as well as we should. But
So many buckets have come in over the last year and been
Right.
promised, and
Right.
yeah. So I'm
Lot has
getting
changed.
it. Mr. Need, I think I'm understanding.
Yeah, no, I want to echo what Mrs. McGinnis said. We know what our peer allocation will be next year, but remember several years ago, it inched up. Then one year, we had a state budget shortfall, and we went down several $100s. In school districts statewide, we're just in a horrible predicament. So I think we do need to be conservative. We have been conservative, as Mr. Hoyer said, and we need to continue that. And we need to understand, the likelihood of that funding continues, knowing that at the end of the day, most of it is at the beck and call of our legislature, and that's just unpredictable. So.
And just to reiterate the points that have been made, I think it was my first year on the board, we had a $475 per pupil cut. And we had very little notice. $490? Yeah, it was not insignificant, and it was very painful.
Yeah.
So I totally
I would've
agree
stayed
that
in
this
email.
this could evaporate very quickly, and it would help us to understand what's really
Yeah.
how much of this is vulnerable, and see the timeline. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I reiterate, I don't think we want to make any changes. I think it's
Right.
really just our understanding. We
Just
want to be
understanding.
engaged in it, on, up to speed. And I mean, this is an area where we just haven't spent as much time as a board because we haven't been together in the last year and a half.
Yeah. I think, when you look down at the bottom piece here, I feel like we've covered certainly the first two. I think the third one really is filtered throughout the others. I mean, when you talk about a staffing and resource plan, I think that's going to come as we're looking at budgets, as we're planning. And then really the last one I'll kind of leave out there. I know there, it was mentioned specifically in terms of mentorship and professional development, and so that's how I characterized it.
Was that for us, or was that within the district?
Well, I think it was the district. It was written more of as a goal statement, kind of continuing the mentorship and commitment to professional development within the district. And I just thought I would say what I've noticed, certainly in the last couple of years sitting in this seat, is that when the district talks about professional development, I feel like those are where we get maybe some of our biggest pushbacks from the community, biggest questions from the community and that's why I wrote it as the role of professional development. I don't know if it's something that we would want to focus on, but since it was mentioned by someone when they questioned me, I just thought, if that was something we would want to learn more about or talk more about, it could be something that we learn about together, not only us, but our community as well, is why is it important? What does it accomplish? Because we have talked about it a lot, even recently, is professional development for our teachers, along with some of the initiatives that that the district has introduced. So that's kind of how I characterized it. It could be a parking lot issue, to quote one of Mrs. Egan's presidential items when she ran this discussion, but I did want to honor everyone's suggestions throughout this process.
It was written by myself, and it had a lot to do with professional development Wednesdays and how we use them, how they're spread across the calendar year, how we intend to continue to use them, and the role of the board and this board is a very good board in their role of professional development. We take it very seriously, we budget it, and we most often go to conference. I mean, I applaud Stephanie in her first year. She recently been sworn in as a board member, and she was at conference like the next weekend. So we take it very seriously, and I think that the information that we have to guide this district and to tell our only employee, the superintendent, how we want the district to run, only comes from us taking the opportunity to go to these. We all serve our community in different professional positions. We didn't go to school to be a board member out of college, out of high school. And so this professional development for the board members, no different than for our staff, is crucial to the academic success of our buildings.
Just even an initial reaction to that, the needle's really moved with respect to education over the last several years. Obviously, last year we were very ingrained in just keeping afloat all different educational formats and getting through COVID. But looking forward to next year, the whole idea, when I say coaches and those kind of positions, they're not static. I mean, most of us in this room and probably on the board, no matter what profession you're in, you've had different type of development on your job. And I think most of us look at those type of opportunities where they call us all into a room and there's 60 people and there's the sage on the stage that's kind of telling us how it is for a number of hours, is not the best type of experience. I think most people agree, no matter what kind of industry you are, job embedded professional learning or development is where it's at. If you're going to teach a teacher how to teach better in terms of their literacy practice, you don't do it in a conference room. You do it in a classroom. And you do it with live kids there where there's professional feedback, there's the learning going on in terms of the practice, and it's integrated. Nobody learns in a room and then, that's the whole idea of what we're trying to push with more hands-on and more integrated learning for students in classrooms. And so that would be my goal would be to have that at a next level. And part of that is not only to have better learning from our teachers, but also less time out of the classroom. I feel like when we do things that pull teachers out of classrooms, sometimes you need it. We can't get around it because a lot of times improvement educations, like changing the wheels on a moving bus, has been the kind of a descriptor. But it's still, every day that we don't have a teacher in a classroom with kids is a day of lost learning. When you have a substitute teacher, guest teacher, it's just not the same. So that combination where you actually could have an extra teacher in the room that day, not only you get the learning of the primary teacher who can improve their practice, and yes, it might take longer because you don't have them all, but the quality is night and day difference, I think, over time, and I think that's panned out in the research in terms of supporting that kind of development. The one exception looking at levels is to make sure that, you know, there's got to be days and times where teachers at different levels can integrate. If we just operate on an individual teacher improving their practice, but they never really take a look at, from a third grade teacher, what's going on in second grade and what's going on in fourth grade, or what's the middle school is seeing lapses in terms of needs, then the program over a period of years starts to separate in terms of its overall integration, and we can't have that either. But that should be more of a minimum approach to kind of pathfind and to be able to range find, I should say, not pathfind, range find, to make sure that we're in the same bucket together.
Well, and I have to say that I cannot be more grateful for the individuals who have chosen the profession of teaching and have come to Clarkston to teach. Because there are schools who have and will start this September school year with substitutes, who are not certified teachers, who are not highly qualified, who have 90 college credits. Could be in basket weaving, it could be in whatever. And those are the types of teachers that are available because there are not enough teachers going into the profession. And we in Clarkston have highly qualified, certified teachers, and I am proud of that.
And at the risk of maybe stating the obvious, I think our goal is, you know, to have kids show at least a year's worth of growth, right? We've said it a few times tonight. Who's delivering our instruction? It's our teachers. I mean, is anybody happy with where we are now? No, we want to do better. I mean, that's the whole point of this discussion, is how do we do better? Really, the only way to do better is investing in professional development for our teachers. I mean, it's the only silver bullet that we have, and it makes so much sense, right? It's obvious that if we want kids to do more and achieve more, right, we have to invest more in our teachers, and that comes in the way of professional development. And I echo 100%. It's not sitting in a classroom learning the theory behind teaching kids. It's working with individual kids of totally unique circumstances of where that kid came from, what they have going on in their life, what is going to be the right way to structure a literacy lesson or a math lesson so that kid grasps it and can move on to the next concept, right? And it's different for every single kid in the classroom, and it's that teacher's job, with the support that we can provide, to move all those kids along.
And not every teacher is good at everything. And I think you can have new teachers coming right out of college that might have some aspects of their practices that are really high level, and you can have obviously master teachers. But even master teachers, it's almost like you're looking at your scratch golf game. You know, nobody's perfect on it, and even professionals have people watch their swing to see where they are at a point in time. And there's always aspects that you can improve. And I think people are looking, again, the magic bullet as some sort of program, and really it's really dissecting. Maybe you teach fractions a little bit differently next year because we've analyzed and looked back that your practices could be, you know, based on actual results and what you're doing, you know, or hey, you know, a teacher down the hall, how do you get these type of results? You don't always have to look way outside of your own district to find an expertise that you can really educate and bring everybody's game up. So I think both those things are pretty awesome.
100%, and I've had the personal experience of having my kid in a first year's teacher's classroom. I mean, it was a little scary because how could somebody coming right out of college have a clue at how to meet the needs of 24 kids in their class, you know, or more kids at the secondary level? How is that even possible that they would have the skills? Like, think about it. Like, if you've been in college and you've student taught, I mean, you just don't have the skills. So how do we provide a great experience? So we have literacy coaches, and we have folks to back up the teacher and help them, and we have that teacher collaborate with their fellow teachers, right? I mean, we have the system in place, and it was a great experience, and I think it continues to be a great experience. And you know, I see Mr. Lucido sitting in the front row. If it's not a good experience, they don't last very long, you know, here. I mean, we make sure we provide the supports that teachers get on the train and do what we need them to do. And so this is such a crucial item. I don't know that, I don't see necessarily a vision of how we as a board could engage or support more beyond what we have going on, except for the fact that when it comes time to the staffing piece and the supports, I think that's how the PD rolls into our level of us providing the resources for it. So I would say, I don't know if we need a separate item, but I feel like we're going to discuss that when it comes to the coaches and support folks and interventionists and that component.
Okay. Fair enough. Anything else? Okay. Great discussion. I mean, I feel like we can combine a lot of these things into, I think looking at my notes, I probably had 6 to 8-ish kinds of topics, and I'll work on that, and, you know, we'll have that going forward.
So I feel like we have a board operating committee, right? So I
Yes.
mean, that one we can kind of kick there. We've got a bond facilities committee, right, Mrs. Egan, that maybe we can own that one and that committee and move that board goal forward of, you know, kind of laying the groundwork. And then I don't know in terms of budget, you know, or you know, the discipline piece or a couple others, and I don't know what else you had on your list, but I don't know, would we want a finance committee to take the lead of something like that?
Stop looking at me.
Huh?
I see you looking at
Who's
me.
looking at who? No, we don't be
Nobody.
looking at each other. No, I don't know about the finance piece. I mean, I feel like that's an area where all of us are more interested
In the
in getting
role,
more
and
education.
the reason why I suggest that, maybe committee is the wrong word, but we've had liaisons in the past where it was sort of the liaison's job to structure the information for the board, so it wasn't the finance committee
Yeah.
making decisions, it was really them saying, this is what we want as a board, you know, here it is. Where it wasn't like the committee was making recommendations to us, it was like the committee was packaging things, because if we don't have something like that, it falls to the president and vice president, and if you're willing to take it on, I mean, I'm certainly willing to put it on you, but that's, I don't know what, out of these pieces, what you're willing to do.
How about I
versus what-
sleep on it?
Yeah, absolutely, we don't
How
have
about
to
I chew on
decide
it? Okay,
now.
yeah.
President Horst, I also have one item that not that I found was missing, but I would like to get feedback in terms of a board administration piece, and it has to do with what we've learned over the last year in terms of a couple things. One is being able to leverage what we've been able to put into place for the district and for individual students. Looking at the experiences that our teaching staff and our administrators have had, they've really had to grow and stretch to try to meet needs this year that they've never done before. There was a tremendous amount of learning because of had to. You know, they were put in a position where they didn't have a choice but to try to trudge forward. And obviously across our district, teachers did that at all different rates. Some are probably better than maybe as a face-to-face, but others obviously was a struggle. But we learned a lot from that. And I know from feedback from our community, there's not interest in kind of pursuing kind of any kind of like hybrid schedule for our district. But I started thinking a little bit deeper and would like feedback to look into with our Teaching and Learning Council, our Curriculum Review Committee, of trying to make options for individual students to more individually design their learning pathways. And when I say that is that we like to think that everybody fits in a cookie cutter square box. But I think Mr. Heyer kind of illuminated earlier, our kids are going all different directions, and sometimes it's really impossible to try to find a program for each one. But what if we had thought a little bit more flexible in our mindset for students that had a plan of study that maybe involved more of a separation from the regular school day? Why do we have to be bound to into the four walls a certain number of hours a day when we can really use some of the flexibility that is out there now to have different educational experiences? Why can't it be more the design of the student and the family to select some of these options over a period of time, not just a single class, you know, but be able to really structure it? And it could be based on their interest. It could also be along the lines of their individual needs. I mean, as a principal, I don't know how many times I heard exceptions. We tried to make a student that might be a figure skater that wants to go on to the Olympics, and how could we amend the school day, or they're a gymnast. But it's way bigger than that. You know, you have students that might, based on their own challenges in schools psychologically, you know, maybe they would function better with a little bit different format. And I'm not saying in mass, but there's individual kids that I feel like we could be providing a better service to that's not going to be lights out in terms of our ability to do it. I never want to stretch out to do anything that is, as you said, a calculated risk of being able to be successful at it, but I feel like we should continue to stretch when it comes to making those programs individualized. And I think that goes in the scope of our families too. I mean, some of the exposure and desires of our families to push their students and give them experiences, why can't they be integrated within the school overall plan? And how can we be a little bit more flexible and be able to mind the store? Now, obviously, it dips into all sorts of areas of policy, school procedure, budget, because it's not, you just don't write a blank check to somebody and say, go out and find your education program. I mean, we can't put our name behind that. But if we were thoughtful about it, and if we looked at it more in terms of individual needs and getting kids to be the best they can, I mean, in my vision, I'd see everything, as you mentioned, not everybody wants to be a pipe fitter, but if you didn't, wouldn't it be great to go work with 1 half day your senior year as opposed to being, immediately tied to our construction program. Maybe there's room for more flexibility. Or if parents want to pursue a more unique part of their study, why can't we help them kind of structure that? But I wanted to kind of just get a little pulse. I think at the level of our Board of Education and policy and working with our community, that would be a great place to start to look at those opportunities. Because I think if we don't, we're going to become one of those school districts that kind of like rests on tradition. That's how we've always done it. And I really want to we have an opportunity here to start to break the mold a little bit. It could be exciting. I mean, again, please do not interpret free for all. I'm saying there's a lot of students that are perfectly fine within the regular Clarkson program, but there's some room for variability as well in my mind.
So Mrs. Crane wanted some history earlier on in the meeting, and I would say once upon a time, we would get together with our administrators and we would hear what I would consider to be some out-of-the-box ideas, and that may be being polite because some of them were pretty out there. And we got away from that because we went through a period of time when we needed to write the unwritten rules of, if you present an idea like that, I mean, we had some folks at the time who were like, well, what about this question and how much is it going to cost and what's the policy? And it's like, wait a minute, it's just an idea. Like, all we want to know is like, is this fit in Clarkson and should we explore it more? Like, it's not a finished product and it still might not go anywhere, but it's our job as a board to say, does this fit with our community?
Research and development.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, my suggestion as you were talking is to do something we did that I've suggested, as we get out of this is maybe go back and do something we did in many years ago. And let's do maybe a board administrative retreat where we take a day, come up with your best crazy ideas, that we might want to discuss, and let us interact with the administrators who have an idea, could talk through and let us give some feedback. It's a good way for us to meet the administrators we haven't met yet because we've been virtual for so long. And even with some newer board members, I mean, you haven't had the chance to be in places where we would have met them. Maybe that's a way that, we take a day and funnel through some discussions and, go through some things and discuss and give you feedback from, our thinking. And ultimately, some of them might go forward, some of them might not, but maybe we can knock off 2 or 3 birds with, one session if we're willing to, put the time in and schedule it.
And as we continue to survey our community moving forward to some of their interests, because I believe some of the crazy ideas can come, or, possible benefit is out there.
Absolutely.
Is not what you're speaking of, we have provided students who have had elite training schedules, alternate schooling schedules, so that they can train and work a schedule that isn't home. So I thought we had a policy, or at least we as a leadership team were doing that. I just wonder how many parents really know about it.
Gotcha. I think that's more linear in terms of where students have the flexibility to be able to take some online classes or university classes that are integrated in their program. We're always looking for students that are outside the box that way. But why do you have to be somewhat special to look at more of a unique program? And I can't even paint how many different times I've talked to people who said, if I just had a little flexibility, if I can make this work. And they're not trying to game the system or trying to work around things. They're truly trying to kind of create a more enriching program. And I'd be proud to be able to support it if we could.
And I suspect that there are a handful of students, not unlike a handful of us employees, that worked very well remotely. So I do see there an opportunity for students who remote education work good for them and give them an opportunity to potentially expand into something that they might not have been able to do if they were in the classroom Monday through Friday, 8 to 2 every day. So, I'm all for giving our students and our parents more flexibility, more choices. We've always allowed our schedule at the high school, junior highs, to be driven by student selection. So I don't see why this should be any different.
At least we can examine it more.
Yeah.
And we do have, obviously, if you want to select into a full virtual program, you're more than happy to do that, because we've entertained a lot of families already this summer who know that, my plan moving forward is that we're going back without distancing, without masks, without mandatory vaccinations or anything like that. And they want to continue. Thank you, but we want to make sure that the other families who aren't ready for that, don't want that we can provide services to them too. So I'm just saying we have those kind of opportunities.
Right.
I think that's kind of the name of the game, and that's America. You need to have that flexibility to kind of write your story.
So you're talking about something in between, right? So these are families because we still have the virtual
Mhm.
program, so you're talking about a little more individualized, a little more flexible.
If it came with a plan,
Yeah.
not just
Right.
willy-nilly.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I love options for kids, right? I mean, when you get
Yeah.
to the high school, we have different, you know, even the middle school and junior high, you start to have options, right? And you know, the integrated science and math program is not for everybody. The AP program is not for everybody. The IB program is not for everybody. The construction tech program is not for everybody. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had a program for everybody?
Yeah.
You know, and that I think is what you're really referring to.
Because we
is-
can't,
is-
right? We gotta have them.
Right.
create their
We've got some new tools in our toolbox. Is there a way to leverage them in a way that students could opt in and try something new without taking away any options that we already have or forcing somebody into something that they wouldn't need or wouldn't want? You know, is there a way to leverage that for a student or their family, right? And I think that's certainly worth exploring.
Do you have ideas on how to move forward with this now, or are you looking for maybe a blessing on how to start exploring it now, or do you feel like you need a bigger, I mean,
I think-
I'm not against the idea of a retreat where we could present a whole bunch of
like
ideas
that.
and
I
toss
think
it
more
around, but
ideas
if,
related to it, I'd like to bring it more to our community in a workshop so they can hear some edges to it. It's not something I think we just wanna flip a switch and rush into.
Right.
Mhm.
But it seems like it would be huge dividends.
Okay.
Sometime this year, I would say when you're ready, I mean, if you have 12 things you want to present to us or 6 things, you know, I mean, sketched out on a napkin that, you know, has had some thought to it, but clearly it's not a plan. I mean, there's a lot more work that have to go into it. Let us react to it. I mean, we might say, nope, that's not going to fly here. There's no way that would fit for our community. Or we might say, you know what, this is awesome. Let's do a survey. Let's get some more feedback. You know, let's see if it makes sense to spend more time on it. And that has happened in the past, not so much recently, but I think that's a way we get some, you know, innovative programming.
Time to look to the horizon.
Yeah.
Mrs. Crane, did you have something you wanted to?
No, I just think the whole idea of this kind of speaks to, I know we've spoken before, and I think this past year showed how important it is for upper students to maybe have a different schedule and sleep in, and how much better they do and how hard that is of their life at that point. And I think just going forward and thinking about this, offering those other options kind of takes care of some of that. So it's always been on my mind. I've always thought we should flip the schedules and little kids should go early and the bigger kids should go later, but it's hard. It's just hard to do.
Up until COVID, that was the biggest board meeting we've ever had. That meeting.
Okay, wasn't
I
on
think-
it yet,
I think
but
I think having gone through what we've gone through, it's certainly time to get more data on it.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
is
just a
that
thought.
something that we could
Yeah.
pull off, and even if it's, you know, the whole community isn't in supportive of it, could we do it on a
Well, that's
on
it.
a
Just these kind of
case basis
right.
That's an option.
These
right there.
things open up more options,
Yep.
and more options are can be a really good thing.
I would just add that we not even think about grades when we think of
Yeah.
options like that, because some people are
Yeah.
night
You're right.
hawks, right? Is that what they call them? Night
Night owls.
Night owls, and then some people are larks, right? They get up early
I mean,
and
I've
they are
got 3
ready to
kids, and they're
go.
all very different.
And I don't think it's age dependent.
No, it isn't. But
So, but I can see where, for an example, some of the kids that are like, used to be jazz band, and they had a 0 hour, and
0 hour.
they were up, and they that was like their favorite time of
Yeah.
day, and that was one of their favorite classes. And so I think if
Yeah.
we can consider scheduling too, it sounds to me like what we're trying to look at, if I paraphrase correctly, something more like what you would see at a college level, where you have independent study and you work with an academic advisor, and you have to work within the parameters of the graduation requirements, but you can start to fine tune what it is you
Yeah.
need. For instance, if you have to have 2 years of science, but you love material science, or you think you like material science, we don't teach material science. We don't have a class, right? But maybe there's something virtual online or a community college class that the student can take that gets them to where they want to go.
yeah.
So I hope I'm understanding what I'm hearing, and it sounds exciting, and I think it's worth pursuing.
Okay, all right. I feel like we've had a good
Great.
discussion here. Thank you.
For
I know
sure.
it was a long one, probably one of the longer ones we've had in a long time. So we're just about ready to move on then to citizen comments. We're going to take just a really short recess. So if you can just give us Can we-
Bathroom break.
Yeah, quick bathroom break. Can we be back within 4 or 5 minutes, please?
Yes.
And then we will move on to citizen comments. So we are in recess. 5 minutes.
What a 5:04?
Yeah, that might help.
Work for some of those kids.
Individual plan, you know, they have those plans for
Yeah,
those school
especially
kids.
for the kids with anxiety meeting at the kids.
To address the board on any topic at this point, and we have 5 citizens who signed up to address the board under item 9. Please remember when I call your name to approach the microphone, state your name and address, and you'll have 2 minutes to address the board per our bylaws. And I will start your time once you start speaking. We will begin with Peter Keller.
My name is Peter Keller, 6450 Waldenwoods Drive. Good evening, President Horst. I want to thank you for the 2 minutes limit you have imposed onto our comments, because that's why I'm back today and it won't be the last time. Following the illogic of equity, we should close our athletic programs and relocate Coach Richardson and Coach Vasil to regular PE classes, because there are a lot of students who are less gifted at basketball and football. The nice and naive cartoon picture Mr. Dr. Ryan sent out on April 30th is in reality leading to this, because not buying tickets to a game and playing games with less talented athletes is destroying the game. The effects of your strategic plan for underperforming schools will be little to none. And my question to the school board is, how many more teachers are we going to relocate next year after we see that the efforts of leveling all elementary schools did not work? The plan came out of left field for us parents who pay school taxes and have now resources taken away for something which in my opinion is not fair and not American at all. Equal class sizes and offering the same programs in all schools of our school district, on the other hand, is fair. It gives everyone equal opportunities and helps everybody to pursue the American dream, and that's what we already have for decades. There are no need for such a program. The sudden urge in the educators community to start transforming our society is social engineering and has horribly failed in the past in other regions of the world. If you think my statement is dramatizing the consequences of the strategic plan and no student will be suffering disadvantages, how about you reduce your headcount by 33 educators and reduce our school taxes, because then you are obviously overstaffed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next we have Christy Giampatroni.
Hello, my name is Christy, 15 Walden Road. Thank you for not bowing down to CRT. Thank you for listening. We know there are still some kinks to work out. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. We love our community, our schools, and our teachers, and we love people, period. We know families move to Clarkston for Clarkston uniqueness. Let's not march to the beat of another drummer. Rochester, Holly Schools, Oakland University, or the NEA. If we are afraid of financial hardships, changing demographics, struggling kids, and dropping test scores, then the answer is to stand firm on our American principles. In God we trust, not equitable principles. We will not follow the chaotic trend of academic and social reform with DEI. We will not compromise. Let's please keep social agendas out of our schools. I quote Dennis Prager, "I could not care less if your racial makeup is black or brown, red, white, or yellow. The only identity I care about, and the only one this school should recognize, is your individual identity, your character, your scholarship, and your humanity. And the only national identity this school will care about is American. Your clubs will be based on interests and passions, not focused on blood or ethnic, racial, or other physical defined ties. Those clubs just cultivate narcissism, an unhealthy preoccupation with the self. The purpose of education is to get you to think beyond yourself. So we will have clubs that transport us to wonders and glories of art and music and astronomy. Those are the things that we should focus on. Clarkston, we are not an equitable school. We are an American school based on American principles. Thank you.
you'll state your name and address, you'll have 2 minutes.
Jason Thomas, I live on Heron Parkway. How you doing, neighbor? I believe the school system's focus should be to encourage academic excellence and should focus on teaching traditionally academic subjects like language, math, science, and history without injecting social agendas into the mix. Please do love and respect everyone you come in contact with, but it stops there. When I grew up in the public schools during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I can honestly tell you that it was about learning, not agendas. Reflecting back as an adult, I don't even know what the politics of any of my teachers were, and that's good. Today, it only takes tears and tirades after a presidential election to know what's cooking. The CRT and DEI discussion has no place in schools, especially if you want to improve scores and scholastic achievement, as I heard several of you board members talk about earlier. And furries, explicit graphic sex ed, and all the other politicized causes out there are not for schools either. We need to act like a school, not a brainwashing camp. I can tell you that I've got a few stories that I've heard around my dinner table from my kids. My oldest daughter came home several years ago and said, "Hey, today in school, one of my teachers told me it's okay to feel guilty for being white. There's no place in the school for that." I had my son tell me that there's a kid who identifies as an animal in his class, and you know what, that's fine until he growls at the teacher with no consequences. And my youngest daughter came home at the end of this recent school year and said, "Hey, I'm learning about all the different positions of gay sex. This is something you guys are not qualified to talk about. That's up to me to talk about at the dinner table with my kids." So let's keep it to learning in the classroom and skip the indoctrination. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Ryan Minto. Ryan Minto. You'll please state your name and address, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Ryan Minto, 7320 Deer Hill. Heading into the school year, it's very clear to me as new facts come out and emerge that the CDC, Dr. Fauci, Gretchen Whitmer, they've all lost their credibility pertaining to COVID-19 guidance. For example, numerous peer-reviewed and published studies conclude that cloth and surgical masks are detrimental to our children's health more than COVID itself. We cannot go backwards this fall. So what should we do when the government leadership is unreliable? We need to step up and be leaders ourselves, use our own experience, discernment, and dare I say, common sense. Please don't overthink solutions just to cater to the lowest common denominator. That's not how we excel moving forward. Get back to the basics, math, science, history, English, and the trades, and push our kids to their limits. Please don't feel like you have to make health decisions for parents and their kids. If you allow parents the freedom to make these choices, it'll enable the school board to focus on what you've been elected to do, teach our kids. Clarkson's been a good school district, and we'd like to keep our kids enrolled. But if the board decides to entertain radical policies like CRT or masking our kids based on the political whims of the government leaders, please know this. One of the unintended consequences of Clarkson's distance learning program was to teach us parents how to homeschool our kids, and that it might be feasible for many of us to do so. If needed, we can and will pull our kids and their funding out of the school district and teach them ourselves. We would prefer not to. We love Clarkson, but we will. And I would like to make one quick but important clarification to a comment made earlier. Someone said a law is a law and we must follow the law. I'll add, except when it violates the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Finally, we have David Meyer.
Good evening, I'm David Meyer, 10548 Woodby Court. and you'll have to forgive me, I didn't have a chance to prepare my remarks. I'm kind of like Trump without a teleprompter. This could get a little interesting. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about CRT. Dr. Ryan, several times throughout this ordeal, you've expressed that CRT is not an approved curriculum in our schools, and that CRT is not going to take place in Clarkson schools. You've talked about the transparent process that curriculums go about development in our district. I appreciate the explanation on that. This leads me to two potential issues. Either one, we're trading DEI for CRT, which are perfectly linked concepts. CRT is a part of DEI. DEI is a part of CRT. If we're trying to mince words, DEI also has no place in our schools. However, CRT is currently being taught in our schools. I was forwarded today an entire social justice unit that's taught in our 10th grade honors English class. It's a whole unit, but one part is the children are to choose books from a list. The top 5 books on this list are The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which covers racial inequality and police brutality. The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert, which covers racial inequality, voting rights, implicit bias, political disenfranchisement. Piecing Me Together by Renee Watson, covering gender and racial inequality, mental health, academic well-being. All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley, police brutality, racial inequality, and white privilege. And Dear Martin by Nick Stone, police brutality, racial inequality, and white privilege. There's about 20 books on this list. All of them cover the same types of topics. This is CRT, textbook CRT, and it's in our classroom. If it's not approved curriculum, what happens to a teacher in our district who is teaching outside of the approved curriculums? What are the disciplinary actions that are in place for that? How do you handle that type of a situation? If this is not welcome and approved in our district, what do you do now? I'll be publishing this on the full unit that I have on the Clarkson Schools Parent Advocates page. I know that Clarkson Schools is a member of that page, so I welcome you to look through it and go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And I'll issue a final call for anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the board.
Jessica Spencer, Walden Woods Drive. I previously mentioned in a previous board meeting that I pulled my kids from the district after I was given 2 weeks to find a place for my children to go to school when Clarkston decided to not reopen. But I wanted to be clear. My husband is a police officer. He risked his life to protect any one of you if you needed him. My son is black. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let my kids...
Please don't use profanity in this boardroom. Thank you.
If I'm going to let my kids sit in a classroom and learn that their dad would kill him, my son, for the color of his skin. There are people 90 miles south of Florida waving the American flag because they're so hungry for the freedom that we're apologizing for in this country. I cannot allow my children to go to the school district that I grew up in, that I have a successful business today because I learned fundamental values in Clarkston school districts, and it is not okay for me to send my kids to a school that will teach them these things. If I feel it's important to teach my son the things that he needs to learn about safety and law enforcement interactions, that's my job to teach them. It's not your job to teach him that. It's my job to raise my children to have morals and ethics and treat everyone with kindness. This pushback on CRT is not because we are bigoted. It is not because I love my brown child less than my white child. It's because I don't want my son being taught that he's less because of the color of his skin. I wouldn't let you teach my black child that. I won't let you teach my white child that. We cannot continue to indoctrinate our children the way that, when Ms. McGinnis mentioned, what happens if,
thank you for your
just
comments.
Paraphrasing, what happens if only the poor kids get
Spencer,
to go to school
thank you for
and
your
everyone
comments.
else can't? I knew what we were headed
Ms.
towards.
Spencer, Thank you for your
It's here.
comments.
My name is Hillary Kugler. I live at 9244 Lake Ridge Drive. I've had my kids in this district for well over a decade. I consider myself a true Clarkston Schools parent advocate. I have met with almost every single one of you, besides maybe Ms. Catalina. I've met with almost every administrator in this district on various issues that are important to me and my family: literacy, inclusion, whole child, and wellness. I have at every turn received an open door from each and every one of you. I consider myself a partner in education. Every person I've come in contact in the Clarkston School District has had the best interest of our students at heart. We may disagree, and we have disagreed on various things, and I may come across as passionate, but I know that everybody's coming from a good place. I am disheartened by what I see and what I've heard from some of our community members. I absolutely think that our schools need to reflect and prepare our kids for a global world that they're going to face. They're going to be in situations where culture and diversity, education are going to be important. The unit you spoke of, my children did that unit. It was fantastic. My daughter loved those books. These discussions are important, they're necessary, and they're healthy when done with a good, guided teacher. Thank you very much for all of everything you do. I know that it's not an easy job, so appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm Ray Llewellyn, Pine Knob Road, Clarkston, Michigan. I just want to say, if you listen to what the people are saying, the parents, the community, they're saying no CRT, no DEI, none of this. And the other thing that I want to say, as a person who sat here tonight and listened, one, the time got changed by a half hour, so it impacts a lot of people that are working. Two, it was very apparent that part of the game was to drag this meeting out as long as you could. But the people did stay. And two, when some of the people have stood up here and talked from the bottom of their hearts, and to watch some of you board members kind of look at each other and smirk after they talked, I think that's pretty rude. A final note. Through this whole school year, any of you that are teachers, were teaching the children with Zoom. So you had cameras that you were using to teach them. I say, turn the cameras on this coming school year so that the parents and people can see what you're teaching. And if you're not teaching CRT, all these parents are going to know that. But if you are teaching CRT, guess what? You'll get caught. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, Jill Thomas, Heron Parkway. If you're going to stand up there and tell my friend Jess not to use language, you might want to look at the books that some of these 10th, 11th, 9th, and 8th graders are being told to read. There's plenty of good American and global literature out there that you don't need to pick the kind of books that you're picking. This is coming from my daughter who graduated in 2019. She had to read some sick and twisted stuff, and she was in the IB program. She got all of her credits, by the way. She's a smart kid. Secondly, what Mr. Meyer was referring to, that book, that unit for, I think it was African American History Month, which is great. That unit, the teacher felt the need to send home a permission slip to read some of those books because they were considered sexually graphic and kind of edgy in some other areas. So I signed the permission slip. My junior has already kind of been flipped by you guys. So I wrote on that permission slip, okay, he can read these, but why don't you pick some authors like Thomas Sowell or some of the other great African American authors? And the teacher actually said, because I hand wrote some stuff on there, the teacher actually said to my son, she mocked me with my son, let me see what we're up against here with your mom. So I didn't appreciate that. These people are correct, and it's not happening. There's neighboring districts that are open enrollment that we can pull our kids out. There's, can homeschool, that would be a better option. There's parochial schools in the district. I personally don't care about the sports anymore. Just this year I've come to find out there's great year-round club sports that my kids can compete in and maybe even do, he is doing even better. So that's all I wanted to say. If you're gonna tell Jess not to use language, please look at the list of books that you're sending home for younger and younger age kids to read.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Michelle Gunton. I live on South Main Street. As a social studies curriculum writer myself, I'm very well aware of the state standards and how schools go about adopting the standards. And while the state of Michigan at this point in time has not done anything that's particularly alarming to me, I do see it happening elsewhere. I see it happening in other states where there are dramatic changes occurring. And while I do really genuinely appreciate Dr. Ryan saying that CRT is not going to be adopted officially in the curriculum in Clarkston schools, I want to say that it's not black and white. And I see that teachers have quite a bit of freedom in how they teach their own classrooms. And so, for instance, if there is a state standard where students are expected at the high school level to learn about the causes and consequences of the American Revolution or key individuals of the American Revolution, I want to know that my daughter is being taught the traditional and correct material and not something from the 1619 Project or something from Hannah Nicole Jones, which I do not agree with and many scholars have debunked. So I know that there are teachers unions out there, national teacher councils out there that are they really do support the 1619 Project and CRT, and these teachers are really feeling strongly that they have every right to teach it in our kids' classrooms. And so my question really is, are we going to be hearing anytime soon about what the repercussions might be for teachers who do feel the freedom to teach this kind of material, despite Dr. Ryan's promise that this is not going to be taught in our schools? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Board of Education meeting is Monday, August 9th. This is when we switch to our new schedule. We will begin that meeting at 7 p.m. Item 11 is adjournment. May I have a motion, please?
I move to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. We are adjourned.